think that should that should sink everything.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So hey everyone, this is Joél. His YouTube channel is Joxel, and we're gonna chat a little bit about Coding Bootcamp. So why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right in.
Hey everybody, I'm Joxel. Like I said, I do have a YouTube channel. I talk a little bit about tech videos and cars and some other things. But my name is Joél Ramirez. I took a Coding Bootcamp, and we're here to talk about my experience.
Cool. So I guess the first question is, what got you initially interested in coding, and then your thoughts on how you got into the Coding Bootcamp experience?
Okay, so what got me interested in coding was a variety of things. I always kind of been into arts. So I started off doing graphic design, freelance web graphics, and that kind of opened my mind into the idea of web development. So I started learning a little bit about web development, taught myself some things, and obviously would spend a lot of time on YouTube and reading. And but I always found that what kind of limited me when it came to designing like a really nice site or specific graphics on the web was the inability to write custom code. And I would always see like these awesome and beautiful websites that like were something that I could never do with like a template builder like Wix or WordPress. And
Yeah.
I really wanted to learn how to do that. So I started digging in a little bit and learning about basic coding and the fundamentals of it. And that's kind of what started my interest with it.
That is super, super cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like connection between like the art side of things and then the coding side of things. We, at least in the coding bootcamp I went to, we definitely had some graphic designers who would come in because they wanted to learn how to, custom build things and implement the art that they have been doing. So that is super, super cool.
Yeah.
I guess the next thing is, what was your application process like for the Coding Bootcamp? Which one did you go to, and then what was the app process like?
Okay, so I went to the Coding Bootcamp here in North Carolina. It was sponsored by University of Charlotte, but it was, I believe the company was actually Trilogy, if I'm not mistaken. The application process was pretty simple. I actually found it through an ad online. I was in between college, and I was deciding whether or not I wanted to transfer to UNCC and do full-time, as a full-time student, or decided to take the boot camp and ended up leading towards the boot camp. The application process was simple. I went online, found all the information, filled out the application, and what they had me do was take an online assessment as well as a interview over the phone. They asked me a couple questions in the interview. It was a very like basic technical interview. It was more just to try and see what your problem solving skills were like. So ended up doing that, passing, and then I had to pull a loan for the class and ended up taking it that way.
Nice. And then I guess like, what was your experience like when you were there? What were some of the challenges you faced? What was the difficulty level?
So at the Coding Bootcamp, it was really interesting, right? Because one of the things I went into expecting was that because the environment is advertised as fast-paced, something you learn really quickly, I imagined it would be very challenging, and it definitely was. It was a little bit frustrating at times because I'm somebody who picks up things pretty quickly, especially when it comes to new skills or something that I'm really interested in. But I wasn't exactly expecting the level of difficulty that I was going to face as somebody who was even like fairly experienced. But overall, I mean, it was something that was consistent. And as you continued in the boot camp, you realize that everybody feels the same way, even people who came in with experience, and it ended up being super positive. So it was definitely not something that was like unbelievably hard that made me want to like quit at any time, but it was definitely something that did challenge me.
Yeah, for sure. I think the difficulty level was like definitely, it pushes you out of your comfort zone. I think that's their goal, is like to get you to really like learn as much as possible. And the only way to do that is to get you outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
What was your job search like afterward?
So after I graduated, I went in, right? So one of the things they tell you whenever you take a coding boot camp is they don't guarantee you a job. So of course I went in with this mindset, but also me taking the coding boot camp was me taking more of a risk on myself, because I believe that because I had prior minor industry experience with freelancing and everything, and I had the necessary drive and work ethic, I always believed that no matter what I did, I would be successful. So this was me more taking a risk on myself. During the boot camp, some of my classmates in my cohort were getting jobs before they even graduated. So a lot of it dealt with like networking and everything. A lot of people had some ins or some family members or friends who already worked in the industry. As for myself, after I graduated, got my certificate, I immediately started applying different places. I was always talking to the career advisor, because they typically provide you with some sort of career counselor to help you optimize your resume, build your LinkedIn profile, and manage those connections. I started a lot with applying everywhere, and originally I wasn't really getting a lot of responses. I mean, I got a few responses, and I had a couple of coding interviews, but they didn't end up really going anywhere. I think I did 3 code tests before I did my last one, which landed me my job. And they were all kind of sort of not so successful. But overall, it took me about 4 months before. Oh, technically, at 2 months, I ended up getting an internship with a startup, and that kind of helped build a more resume padding experience. But I actually landed my full-time job about 4 months after I graduated.
That's awesome. How many jobs do you think you applied to?
Whew, how many jobs did I apply to? I was all over it, man. I easily, and obviously with tools like LinkedIn and Monster or Indeed or anything like that, it makes the job application process a lot more streamlined. So it's not like before where you would have to go and fill a paper application, all that other stuff. Everything's like online. You save your resume, you can just shoot it to a bunch of people. So I know I applied over to 150 plus jobs. I ended up interviewing at 3. 2 of those went as far as an in-person interview in-person technical interview after my code test. But overall, it was about 150.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much like those are the numbers that people should expect when they're going in. I think, at least from my experience, a lot of people expected that, I only have to apply to 10 jobs to get a job. And it is not a walk in the park at all. It is a complete grind. You have to apply over and over. Like, it's wild. I mean, some people applied to over 300 jobs.
I believe it.
You know, got 1 or 2 in-person interviews. So,
and I think one thing that people don't always consider too is location, because it also depends on what your goals are. You know, if you're somebody who wants to move and you have obviously a lot more options at your disposal, especially when it comes to looking for jobs in different parts of the country, different parts of the state, or wherever you may stay. For me, being that I wasn't super willing to move yet, and I wanted to try and find something, Charlotte is an up and coming city. They're a lot more of a business minded and business focused. So when it comes to the developers, they all worked in some of the older technologies that I didn't actually like learn about in my coding bootcamp. A lot of that we learned a lot of more bleeding edge stuff like React and like Node, JavaScript, all that good stuff. They were looking more for like C#, .NET, and some old stuff like Angular and Ruby. And, you know, and a lot of that's because in the enterprise business, a lot of those people, you still use those legacy programs because they don't really want to upgrade because it's not really cost effective, you know? So when it comes to, a lot of people have to consider when it comes to location, how many jobs you're going to apply to, because, you know, you have a lot more options with that.
Definitely. I think the final question is, do you think the Coding Bootcamp experience was worth it? And then what's your ultimate takeaway? Like what was the big learning experience from it other than the technical aspect?
I think for me, the Coding Bootcamp was definitely worth it. Like I said, I primarily started it because I was trying to take a risk on myself in believing that I was able to achieve the goals that I had set in place, and believing that I would be able to succeed while taking an alternative route to the typical thing, which is going to college, you know? Trying to set my family on a different path, that was something that was a big motivating factor for me. But ended up totally being worth it. I'm glad that I had the experiences I met some really cool developers that I still talk to this day. Even in other cohorts from different classes, you know, typically they'll put you in an alumni program, which puts you in connection with a lot of different people. But one of the things that I took away from it is that it really taught me the value of being able to have confidence, self-confidence, and being able to achieve your goals and really not let opposition or not let, you know, tough times or challenges, you know, restrain you from being able to keep that enthusiasm and motivation going. It also taught me how to learn the basics of programming. I mean, one of the things that I find is that once you learn one language and you learn it, you know, fairly well, you understand the fundamentals behind like what coding is, and that it's so much more of a problem solving and logic based thing that translates across multiple languages. So like once you learn one language, it's easier, I find, to pick up a newer language because you start understanding a lot of the core concepts and principles. And that was something that I really took away from that bootcamp.
I completely agree. I think there's so much more than just the technical concepts, and then also just like learning in general. It really teaches you, it forces you to figure out how to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on this and sharing your thoughts. And if you want to check out his channel, so I'll link it right in the description here. I'll link it in the description down below, and then also in the sidebar on the end screen. So it's Joxel, and his name is Joél. And he has a bunch of Coding Bootcamp and tech videos in general. Cool. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to ask me a couple questions. I do plan on making a video with you again, just talk about your experience and some of the things that you've dealt with. So I'll definitely be posting that on my channel. So I hope you guys can check it out.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much.
Thanks, man.